Hello and welcome to another edition of the AudioVision Smart Stack. I'm Dave Lombard, market leader in Orange County, and I'm here today with Brett Loehmann, principal architect at the world-renowned McClean Design. Originally from the Chicago area, Brett holds dual master's degrees in architecture and construction management and brings a deep passion for creating inspired, integrated spaces that help shape the way that we connect and live. So first off, how do you help clients differentiate between what they want versus what they actually need, especially in regards to budget, building codes, or system infrastructure?
Well, I would say that there's definitely things that clients may not want, but they definitely have to have. I would say one good example is sprinklers. No clients like sprinklers, but it's just something that code requires. And so we get through that and just say, here's the necessities from a code standpoint. And then many times some clients are very smart. They know what they want, and other clients, the world is kind of wide open to them. So they say, what could I get? And so one way to do that is to go a bit backwards and say what has worked or hasn't worked for you in the past. Have you gone to a different place like a hotel or some place that you really enjoyed the audio or the video, and so you kind of go from past experiences and you try to lead them on this journey. But then when you get into the technology of it, that's really when we try to lean on some of our experts in the field.
Of course, so the education piece.
Yes, yeah, and a lot of times we find ourselves being educated as well because technology is always changing. So I think as soon as you have something dialed in, next thing you know, the next year something new came out. So it's always evolving, which is great. But you're constantly educating yourself and trying to educate your clients as much as you can. And sometimes you'll get clients that educate you. So because they get kind of down a rabbit hole and they get really inspired by something that they like, in particular music, or if they're big on their TVs, they'll come to you with a specific TV that they've dialed in from a past project or past experiences. And so that's kind of locked in. But then everything has to come back together and everything has to work together. So that's really the most complex part of it is taking each individual piece and trying to marry it together.
How do you balance client vision with what might be a limitation due to technical details or just the physical site conditions?
Well, I will say most of our projects are new build, so that's an advantage to us in that we are not constrained by a lot, but existing conditions is quite interesting because every project is set within a context. And so I'll give you one good example in which we're actually exploring right now, which is we have a project out on the water and there's an existing constraint outside of the project limits that's causing a bit of distress to our project, being sound coming out from across the water from boats that are passing by. And so one piece of technology is to try and mask that sound. And so it's the study of sound waves and different hertz, and really trying to use the constraints that you're given and come up with something creative to try and make your project how you feel it should be, but also just taking in mind factors that you can't control.
Yeah, and still maintaining your design intent and not ruining what the vision that you're going for as well.
Yeah, and I think like on that project we're trying to do it with a few different techniques. We've got speakers and we've got different water features, and so one way to think about it is you could load up every space with speakers, but aesthetically that's not so pleasing. So you have to put them in an opportune way, but also a way that helps you. I mean, there's music is a good example too, because you can listen to music for purposes of listening to the music, but even when the music's not on, that's where technology, you can mix different sounds to make it sound like a tropical jungle or something if you're trying to drown out sound outside of where you're at. And then video is another big thing as well, because each TV has a different way of seeing it, whether it be like the OLEDs or if it's a projector. And for us, with our houses, we love to have light come into the houses, but that's a deterrent when you're trying to watch something of high quality. So you have to balance technology as well, and that all kind of ties back into the system where if you want to watch a movie and you want to be able to see it crisply, you have to work with the shades to drop down, and if it's blackout shades, and that may be in a main space. If you're in a media room, it's a completely different feel. Yeah. So you look broadly across the project, but then you dive into each space, and really it comes back to a little bit of education, but also trying to extract from the client how they want to use each space. And sometimes they don't know, and so you have to kind of take them on this experiential journey and offer, like, do are you going to spend your mornings in this space where there's going to be a lot of sun coming in, or are you going to spend your evenings out on the deck where you want to hear, you know, some of the sounds from the woods out back, and you know, it's really, it's basic that it's technology, but there's so many other factors that come into it.
Yeah, understanding how your clients are going to use the space is going to be paramount.
Yeah, 100%.
Is there a particular technology that you find especially valuable or well suited for the modern open style homes that you design?
I would say scenes, if I could boil it down to one word,
Yeah.
because I think that's part of the experiential quality of how we try to design, is to this connection between inside and outside, and there's a different feeling in the morning versus the middle of the day versus the evening. And so whether it's the motors of the doors opening and closing, or it's the sound where it's just background music and, you know, not quite elevator music, but kind of just that music that flows throughout the house, versus a time when you have a whole group of people over, or if it's just you and the family. So I would say you can provide all the infrastructure, but then it's about setting the scenes and making it really easy, where you may not have 50 scenes, you may have 2 or 3 scenes, but you say, I want a mellow night, and, you know, the whole house kind of turns into this mellow night feel, whatever that may be for that person, whether it's the lighting being dimmed to a certain level, or background music playing, and then if you're having a party, you know, like party mode. So there's these different modes, and so I think the one word I would use is setting scenes using technology.
Perfect. So essentially, the right light in the right space at the right time.
Yes. Yeah. And it goes back to programming as well, because it's, you know, you may come with a template of a program, and then it comes down to the AV consultant or the AV expert working with the client, with the end user, and dialing in what they feel is right. You know, the different levels of sound, the different levels of light, certain things being closed off versus opened up. So,
what has been your experience and McClean Design as a whole's experience with tunable white lighting?
You know, that's something I find that really interesting, because even when I was in school, just learning about different light levels, and always kind of going back to the original light being candlelight, and trying to mimic that 100 CRI versus what seemed to me being, everything was kind of pushing bluer, which is great, but then all of a sudden now we have blue light glasses. So it's like we pushed our lights to be blue, and now we're trying to shield the lights. So I think the tunable white really can be powerful moving forward, and it's even powerful today, and just trying to mimic natural light.
Mimic the sun.
Yeah, I mean, the golden hour around sunset, you don't want your lights to be super bright. You want them to try and mimic that. So, you know, a bit like trying to match the circadian rhythm, but also some clients just like things really bright, and other clients like things not so bright. So being able to be tunable is a great feature, I think, with lighting.
Yeah, having that flexibility kind of provides all aspects of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to a woman doing makeup. You know, like, you can't do makeup with a certain light, because you're trying to make it natural. So, and that goes back to not just saying we're going to use 3,000 across the project, or we're going to use 2,700, or whatever it may be. I think if it has the ability to be tunable, then, because that's one of the freedoms, I think, if you're allowed to have that freedom, is the freedom to adjust, instead of just being locked in on something from the beginning. And going back to the budget as well, you know, it takes a lot to replace a whole room full of fixtures, but if the fixtures are tunable, it gives you the freedom to adjust as you need.
Definitely. In your experience, what has been the best process for ensuring collaboration across all trades to keep projects moving forward, and most importantly, staying on budget?
Well, budgets are always tricky, and I think that just is a result of the world we live in, with tariffs and taxes, and so you can't really control the budget, though I think it's really the mindset of, on one spectrum, you can say budget's not an issue. It always becomes an issue, but budget's not the factor. I just want the best of the best, and then the budget results of that. And then on the flip side, if you say I have a certain budget for technology, that's how you can start to work backwards. And then at some point you may meet in the middle, and I think that certain things are more important to users than other things. For example, if somebody has a media room, you can have $1 million media room, or you can have a $50,000 media room, and the $50,000 media room can still be great, though the $1 million one just has those bells and whistles, and we kind of have this mindset of like good, better, best. And I think for clients, it kind of goes back to education. It's not always just a one fix, this is the only product you're going to get, and it's really leaning on AV consultants and really across the board, just any subcontractor, whether it be plumbing fixtures, is like here's a range. And so early on in projects now, if we're doing pre-construction, we try to have that range instead of just saying here's the cost of your house. It's like this gets you to something that's nice, and then there's a level that's even nicer, and then you can dig into what makes it nicer. Is it the window system? Is it the a plumbing fixture that's twice as expensive as the other one? So you always got to get to a certain point that it has to work and it has to function, but then you can only go up from there. So I mean, it's a lot of hours to do that. It's a lot of involvement from a lot of consultants and a lot of subcontractors, because we always, we're on the design side, we look at it from a design perspective. On the construction side, and this is where I think AV and technology is pretty useful, because a lot of times they're design build.
Yeah.
And so they become the designers and the installers, which is really helpful, because they wouldn't install something that necessarily doesn't work for them, versus a plumbing contractor saying I would have done it this way, versus a plumbing engineer routing it that way. So I think just everybody working together. I think patience is important these days, and then sometimes being the filter through the client, because a lot of that can overwhelm a client. So you kind of have to choose. Maybe if you're offered 10 speakers because of different reasons, you come down to like, well, this is the best speaker for sound, or this is the best speaker for the aesthetic. And it's a balance between aesthetic and function, I think, as well, because I was telling you earlier an example of, I like the small speakers because they're small and because they're not these big round circles in the ceiling, but the bigger speakers tend to be better quality. So you have to offer that to the client, and then when they want to dig into it and try to understand it, having that right person, that right consultant to really bring their expertise to it, that's important.
Perfect. On another note, I know you personally and McClean Design as a whole has been heavily involved in the LA fire rebuild. Is there anything you can tell us about your efforts there, maybe from the most rewarding aspect, or perhaps even the most challenging aspect so far?
Well, I think things outside of our control are challenging, just from the process of permitting and codes, what codes are staying, what codes are changing as a result of the fire. I think another big constraint that to be mindful of is budget. I think when you rebuild a house, well, one, most of these fire rebuild owners didn't intend to ever build a new house. So trying to work with things that they thought, whether it was their temporary house or their forever house, trying to go back and say, what did you really like about that, and how can we implement that? Probably when you bought it, if it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's more expensive now, and that's something we can't really control. But I think budget is a big thing on these fire rebuilds, if we can try and help control it. And then I know us personally, we've been speaking to a number of clients about these fire rebuilds, so I think you come to a mindset slightly different during a fire rebuild than you do on just what we'd call a typical project, or a project that is not a result of a community burning down. So I think you are a bit more tender with it, if you will, especially with budget concerns, and just bringing in kind of a core group of people you can trust because of the circumstances in which you're put in that position now. Definitely.
How can your design partners and contractors best support you to achieve your architectural vision?
I think recently I came across somebody told me this, and I think it's really resonated with me, because architecture is kind of this broad umbrella for a lot of things that fall underneath architecture, and so there's a sense of responsibility, but sometimes I would say architects are a mile wide and an inch deep, and then consultants and specialists are an inch wide and a mile deep. And so it's really like this structure of being aware of everything related to the architecture as a whole, kind of like a general contractor, but then really harnessing and working with the specialists in their field who really do this stuff day to day, who probably have a lot more knowledge than you on that specific piece of whatever you're trying to accomplish for the architecture. So I think the architectural vision is important, but it takes an entire team, and then also just the collaboration within different teams or different consultants or different subcontractors. The plumbing subcontractor should talk to the mechanical subcontractor, should talk to the structural subcontractor, because they're all vying for the same space. And then technology, just to throw you under the bus, technology always falls, it's always like the last piece. And so I think like pre-wiring is very important, and it's a consideration of, especially with custom homes, is if you think you might want it later, just pre-wire it. And so running all that infrastructure is important, and working, if it's technology and all the conduits, talking to the electrical engineer. And so I just think that everybody needs to work together, and it's a tall task, and it takes a lot of patience, but just kind of getting all the right pieces in the right place at the right time is the best way to manage that if you can.
Perfect. Well, Brett, thank you very much for joining us here today. It's been fantastic speaking with you. Thank you everyone for watching another edition of the Audio Vision Smart Stack. Be sure to hit subscribe and check in for the next edition.